Hello, welcome back. This is Dr. Jeff Tarrant, Director of the NeuroMeditation Institute. And in this lesson, wanted to give you a brief, very brief, introduction to the focus style of neuromeditation. So to begin, what we're really talking about with a focus style is any kind of a meditation practice where you are selecting a target for your attention. Could be the breath, could be a mantra, which is just a word or a phrase that you repeat over and over as a way to hold your attention. Could be a visual image. Could be something external, could be internal. In some ways it kind of doesn't matter as long as you're picking a single target, holding your attention there. If you've ever done this before, you know what happens. After about 4 seconds, the mind decides to go do something more interesting. It wanders off. The next job is to recognize that your mind wandered off and bring it back. That's kind of the whole process. Sounds really simple. As you probably know, it's quite challenging. Now, what is this particular style good for? Why would we use this style? Well, if your goals are to reduce distractibility, to increase your attention, reduce mind wandering, increase your self-monitoring, so the ability to be aware of where your mind is moment to moment. So mental stability, these kinds of things, if those are your goals, so it might be connected to concerns with ADHD or maybe memory functions or perhaps recovering from a mild traumatic brain injury. All of these types of concerns and goals are perfect for the focus style because you're really learning to engage and exercise particular functions. And the more you use those functions, sustaining attention, catching mind wandering, the better they get. So one of the areas we talk about a lot with focus meditation is ADHD. Now, I want to say that just because we're using ADHD in this context, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily be diagnosed with ADHD to benefit from this. If you have any concerns that are related to ADHD, then this may be a good match for you. And if you think about it for a moment, the skills that you're practicing in a focus meditation match up perfectly as a counterbalance to concerns with anything related to ADHD. So you're learning to develop a stability of attention. So when you're doing a focus meditation, that's the primary thing. Can you hold your attention for an extended time period on one thing? This is exactly what we want folks with ADHD to be able to do. If you practice that, it gets stronger. Again, I just mentioned a moment ago the ability to monitor yourself, to be aware of where your mind and your attention are moment to moment. It takes practice. Meditation is a skill, and just like any skill, whether you're learning to play a musical instrument or a second language, whatever it is, you have to practice. And the more you practice, the better you get. Meditation is the exact same way. Learning to disengage from distractions. Again, this is a real stereotypical but common issue with ADHD. Getting distracted and then being lost in the distraction, forgetting what you were doing in the first place. If you think about the meditation, that's exactly what you're doing. The mind wanders off, you're catching the mind wandering and returning it back. So developing these internal brain circuits is really what it's about. So let me give an example of a research study that demonstrates how doing and engaging in a focused meditation not only changes the brain, but changes some of the functions related to the frontal lobes. So this particular study took a large group of individuals and gave them 9 months of meditation training. Now, for 3 months, they did one style of meditation. Then they would switch. For 3 months, they would do another style. And the last 3 months, they would do a third style. So they had 3 groups of people doing this simultaneously. And they could counterbalance what order people received each of the meditation trainings. So before and at the end of each of the 3-month time periods, they would measure brain activation patterns, they would give them a variety of cognitive and psychological tests. One of the styles of meditation that they learned corresponds to what we call focus. One of the styles that they learned corresponded to mindfulness, and one style corresponded to open heart. So just looking at the focus style, what they found was that after 3 months, there was significant increase in activation of the anterior prefrontal cortex, including a brain structure called the anterior cingulate. So this is right up here. So the prefrontal cortex is on the forehead. The anterior cingulate runs right down the midline, right in the front. So again, making the point that when you are engaging in these focused practices, you're actually changing your frontal lobes. You're activating them, you're engaging them, you're growing your frontal lobes, which are important for so many different kinds of cognitive skills. So including attention, including memory, including actually inhibiting things that you don't like. So the ability to stop yourself from doing things that you don't want to do, that's frontal lobes. So again, you can see a really direct correlation between this and ADHD. Now, here's the tricky part. This probably all makes sense. Of course, how do you do this if you're not good at it? Right? So if you have ADHD and we say, great, you should do a focus practice, that's probably the hardest possible thing to do. And asking somebody to just focus on their breath is very boring and challenging if you have a hard time sitting still and paying attention to anything. So one of the skills developmental approaches that we use is called scaffolding. So what we try to do is provide people with a lot of support and structure around developing this focus skill. As the skill gets stronger, we can take away that support. So in this way, what you're doing is helping people walk toward the goal. I think this is actually really important, and one of the reasons why many people don't stick with a meditation practice, because they start and then they feel like a failure because they can't sit and pay attention to their breath for 30 minutes and have the idea that that's what you're supposed to do. But one of the ideas that we have discovered is that if you help people by making the process a little bit easier, they will stick with it. They will do it. The brain circuits get stronger, and then you can make it more challenging as time goes on. So just to give an example of one of the approaches that we use that's part of this kind of scaffolding idea is learning to use the body as a biofeedback tool. Now, what's biofeedback? Biofeedback is really any kind of a mechanism where you're getting information about what's happening in the body. So, we think of biofeedback as using technology, and it can be. You can hook up a little sensor to your fingertip, you can monitor your skin temperature, and when the skin temperature goes up, that's a sign that you're more relaxed. When the skin temperature goes down, it's a sign that you're more stressed. The blood flow is moving away from the periphery. That's biofeedback. You're getting information about what's happening in the body. Now, what's interesting is that there are ways that you can pay attention to the body that become their own source of biofeedback that doesn't require any equipment at all. So, for example, how you're sitting. How are you sitting when you're meditating? Well, there's lots of instruction about how you should sit. And I'm saying should in air quotes, because from our perspective, it depends. How you're sitting depends on you, and it depends on what your goal is, what type of meditation you're doing. So for a focus style, you want to be alert, focused, and relaxed. So what does that look like in your body? So rather than thinking of it generically, oh, I'm supposed to sit cross-legged on a cushion and my hands have to be in this particular way, well, what does it look like in your body if you are alert, focused, and relaxed? So learning to start to pay attention to that and experiment. Try different kinds of postures. See what works best for you to help you stay in that mental state. Now, a couple of tips that can be helpful. Sitting upright can be helpful. Again, focused, alert, relaxed. And looking at some of the images on this slide, you have some really good examples. And if you actually pay attention to the women in, looks like a yoga class, the woman in the front in the green top, her posture looks different than the other people sitting next to her. So it's possible that her posture, kind of slumping forward, chin in the air, may be indicative that she's less engaged in the meditation. We know a couple of things. That if you are holding your posture upright, straight spine, chin slightly tucked, this tends to facilitate that state we were just talking about. When the mind tends to get a little bit over-engaged, you're thinking too much, the chin tends to float up. The head will rise, actually. Literally, you're in your head. If you can be aware of that, if you can look at your body periodically during your meditation and see, where's my chin? Is my chin floating up? How does that give me information about my internal state? This is the biofeedback. Conversely, when the mind starts getting tired or sloppy or you're starting to space out, what happens then? The chin drops, the shoulders slump, the posture slumps. That is information. So again, if maybe every minute during your meditation you do a check on the body, you can use that to help you re-engage in the intention of how you are behaving in the meditation itself. You can also use hand placement to help you. So you'll hear different meditation teachers and programs talk about mudras. Those are just different hand postures, right? So, you often see pictures of people sitting with their hands like this, resting on their lap or extended out. That's a mudra. So you can use a mudra to also give you information about your internal state. So one of the mudras that I like is very simple. You simply place one hand, one palm on the other. Doesn't really matter which one. And then the thumbs are lightly touching. So you can rest this in your lap, but you've got this nice little relaxed hand posture. And what you will notice is that the tension in the thumbs, how hard they're pressing against each other or falling apart, has something to do with your internal state. If you're over-engaged, you're thinking too much, you're agitated, the thumbs tend to press hard between them. When you start to space out, you're losing focus, they fall away from each other. So again, you can use your posture, your shoulders, your chin, your hands to give you information about your internal state. It can be really helpful, and it's fairly straightforward and basic. The last thing I'll mention here is the eyes. Now, we're not using eyes as biofeedback exactly, but the idea that you can meditate with your eyes open or your eyes closed. Again, from our perspective, don't worry about what a book says or what anything else you've read suggests. Try with your eyes open, try with your eyes closed. Which one helps you stay in that specific state of consciousness? Everybody's different. If I am in a room full of people and I ask everybody to experiment with this, usually about 2/3 of people prefer eyes closed and a third prefer eyes open. That's a lot. That's a lot that have a variation in the style that's going to be helpful for them. If you don't experiment, you won't necessarily know. So, encouraging you to give it a try. Try it both ways and see what happens. Now, finally, I was mentioning scaffolding. And one of the things that we do is try to provide a variety of strategies for people. Again, just focusing on the breath is not likely to work for everybody. And so we like to have a variety of strategies and teach a variety of strategies so that people can experiment, they can try things, and find what works for them. So, simple things like counting the breaths. So if you're counting the breaths while you're watching the breath, now you're adding a cognitive element. You actually have two things to pay attention to, but they're both connected to the breath. It's a really effective strategy. We call it layering, where you're putting more than one technique on top of each other to help engage the attention. You can stand when you're meditating, right? And if you've never done this before, you may be thinking, what? I've never seen a picture of somebody standing when they meditate. In the Qigong tradition, we do almost all of our meditations in a standing posture. And again, the idea is, what is the posture that's going to help you stay engaged and alert? If you're standing, it's pretty hard to fall asleep. So if you're somebody that falls asleep when you meditate, stand up. Standing automatically activates certain parts of the brain, a region in particular called the reticular activating system. You stand, activates the reticular activating system, which arouses the brain. It's going to keep you more engaged. Using something tactile, like mala beads, right? So these are like prayer beads, where you can count repetitions while you're physically moving the beads through your hands. Another strategy. Other types of movement practices, I mentioned Qigong. There's actually a lot of Qigong exercises that can be turned into a focused practice. So a simple repetitive movement, so you're moving the body with the breath, with your focus. Again, layering. So even looking at specific targets that you're using for your focus practice can be important. So rather than just focusing on the breath, using visualization and imagining breathing in and out of your third eye, breathing in and out of your forehead, breathing in and out of your heart. So again, adding some additional components to a simple breath practice can be really useful. We kind of mentioned using things like a mudra, right? Repeating a word or a phrase. You can use an external focus. It could be an image. It could be a mandala. It could be a candle flame. So the point is that there are many, many strategies and approaches that all fit within the focus style of meditation. And it's going to be difficult to know which ones are going to be best for you until you experiment and try them and really evaluate for yourself.